Hello. Thank you all for coming tonight. There's quite a lot of folks here, which is exciting. So I'm going to be talking about platform engineering. So thanks for teeing that up, Ivan. That was perfect. And specifically about switching to multiplayer mode. So how did the idea for this talk come about? It came from talking to lots of organizations about how to get more from their internal platform without having to actually grow the size of their platform team. So I'm going to share how my team at Syntasso thinks about this and where we've helped some organizations actually solve it. A brief introduction. So I'm Paula Kennedy. I'm one of the co-founders of Syntasso, and we make an internal a framework for building internal platforms called Kratix, which Ivan's kindly also mentioned, so thanks for that. I'm also active in the sort of London community and tech scene and platform engineering. I don't know, I do a bunch of stuff, but anyway, less important. I'm going to start with a bit of a history lesson. So to understand the pain that platform teams currently face, we need to understand kind of the journey we've been on. So once upon a time, there were some developers. Let's call them Alex. And there were also some operators, and let's call them Steve. And so, sorry, also don't throw popcorn. This is a Minecraft themed talk, but no chicken jockey or popcorn or any of that jazz. Thanks very much, or you can do it later. Anyway, we have Alex's and we've got Steve's. And Dev and Ops, they were very siloed, right? So once upon a time, we had this wall of confusion. You had devs writing code and throwing it over the wall. You had ops kind of trying to support code that they hadn't written themselves. They were often on call for it. And there was a lot of finger pointing and blame, and teams were very siloed, right? So to solve that kind of friction and silo challenge, we had DevOps came along. So that was around about 2009, 2010. The idea being that to avoid the silos of two separate teams, let's just smush them together and have one team, and we'll call it DevOps. And this was a way to kind of reduce the silos and empower teams to build and run everything for themselves. And that was great, right? So for some time, that worked really well. And what we started to see was teams have multiple DevOps teams. Within one organization, multiple teams, right? And so that started to lead to duplication. So the DevOps teams themselves are solving the same problems over and over again. And sometimes they're solving the same problem with slightly different tech stack or slightly different versions of things. And that's lots of waste, lots of duplication, etc. And in addition, we also saw that the amount of work that those DevOps teams had to do also started going up. So teams are having to figure out how to use more tools, how to do more services from infrastructure, networking, CI/CD, observability. Like the tech stack just kept growing, and it's become more and more complex, right? So the cognitive load on that team just kept kind of going up. And so it's been, pretty tough. And aside from all of that complexity, we've also had teams having to face other internal concerns. So things like security or compliance. And apologies if you're in one of those teams and I'm calling you a ghast or a creeper. That's not intentional. It's more that if you're not in those teams, those concepts can feel a bit scary, right? A bit unknown of how to handle them. So this is just for illustration purposes only. But with all of the tools and all of the complexity and all of the internal concerns, we're just seeing more and more cognitive load landing on these DevOps teams, right? The amount of things they have to think about, the amount of things they have to try to remember and keep in their heads just keeps going up. So to solve those types of challenges, really DevOps at scale, what we've seen is the rise of platform engineering. So platform engineering is not really new, but it's certainly becoming more popular, and we've seen the emergence of sort of principles around it. So the idea being, you have platform teams, and they are there to really enable developers to serve their end customers, and they do that mostly by building a platform, right? It's pretty nominative determinism that platform teams build platforms, but that's typically what they do. The idea being that they build the platform that serves their users, right? So the DevOps teams need tools and services, platform team can supply them to reduce concerns for those developers. And then ideally, those developers get to self-serve the things that they need, right? So they're still being able to build and run their own code, but they can self-serve the things they need from the platform Platform is not a bottleneck, it's an enabler, and platform team can take care of lower level concerns. App teams focus on the good stuff at the kind of the application layer. But a common problem that we've seen is that platform teams themselves are then being asked to provide and support more and more tools and more capabilities, right? The cognitive load that I described on those application teams hasn't gone away. We've just shifted it all onto the platform teams, right? So they're being asked to support all these tools and services. And not just that, but we also talk a lot about developer experience. And we want developers to have a lovely experience writing their code. And so the platform teams are being asked to provide that lovely experience, right? So it's a lot of pressure onto that platform team, which takes me back to my first question. How do we do that? How do we make that platform team valuable? How do we make that team effective without basically having to have 100 people in the platform team, right? How can we get more out of the platform team? So one way to answer that is I like to consider asking who should do what. And my favorite way to answer is with looking at the book Team Topologies. Who's read this book? Oh, wow. Okay, apparently I'm in some... Normally I'm like, oh, everyone's read this book. Apparently not. Okay, then I would recommend reading it. It's not that thick. It's not hundreds of pages. If you don't want to read it, you can also find talks by the authors online. There's lots of content available. It came out in 2019, so it's not that new. I think the authors are actually working on an updated version right now. So that will be coming out this year, I think. Anyway, Team Topologies. I'm not going to go into masses of detail because it's a whole book, obviously, on its own. I'm just going to cover some of the key elements of the book. So in Team Topologies, they talk about 4 different team types. Stream-aligned teams that you might think of as application teams, enabling teams, complicated subsystem, or what you might think of as kind of specialist teams, and then platform teams. So the problems I've described so far, I've described the problem where we've got developers who get wrapped up into a sort of a DevOps team and get asked to build everything themselves. And we've seen the rise of platform teams existing, but then having too much expectation placed on them, right? They're being asked to do absolutely everything. So really, the question is, how can we share the load across our organization, right? How can we bring more teams into the mix of building the internal platform so that we can spread the cognitive load more easily? And this is where the multiplayer approach comes in. So we use the term multiplayer at Syntasso quite often. Sometimes it's called platform democratization. You might have heard that. You might also have heard producer-consumer model or even provider-consumer, all basically the same thing. Here's my hot take. It's basically how the provider-consumer model is how you scale platform engineering. So if you think about things at scale, you've got platform engineering scales DevOps. Multiplayer mode of platform engineering is how you scale platform engineering, right? This is how you can kind of reduce that load on the platform teams. So I'm going to walk through 2 examples of how specialist teams can kind of contribute into the platform. Number 1, let's consider that you've got your application teams who want to get access to a database. So I've taken Postgres as an example. Now, in an ideal world, your app teams should be able to access Postgres on demand as a service, so that when they need one, they get one, right? Now, in your organization, you might have some database specialists. You might have some Postgres experts who know exactly how to configure it, exactly the rules within your organization, and they know exactly how they want their application teams to consume Postgres. Instead of trying to pass that specialist knowledge onto the platform team or onto the app teams themselves, what about if we could actually get the platform specialists, the database specialists, to actually wrap this up as a kind of platform building block and contribute it into the platform so that the platform team doesn't have to do it themselves, right? If they can make Postgres as a building block that can be delivered into the platform, they can configure it how they want. They are the subject matter experts in Postgres within your organization. So they can configure this to work exactly how your org wants it, but without having to pass that knowledge onto other teams, right? They're not going to overload other teams. And then when they've contributed it, the consumers of the platform then get access to it. And that can be true for other types of tooling, right? Not just databases. It could be true for networking and storage and observability. If we can take specialist tools, that your experts in your organization know precisely how they should be consumed, turn them into building blocks and put them into the platform, then we're not passing over knowledge, we're just passing over the capabilities. Let's take another example. So instead of a specific tool, let's think about security. So I took some Minecraft gold armor to illustrate security. Imagine that what you want to have is security embedded in the platform. Again, within organizations, you've got security experts, right? And typically, aside from being a bit scary, it can often be seen as a bit of a bottleneck, and security comes at the end of a process because you probably don't have enough security experts to embed one per DevOps team. So it's seen as a blocker sometimes. But what if you could actually embed the security into the platform without having to get your platform team or your DevOps teams enabled in all things security, right? If we can package security up again as a building block, if it can be codified, it could be a scanning tool, something like Sneak, it could be a policies tool, it could be that you need to incorporate some manual checkpoints into your workflows so that security can approve certain things. But if you can codify whatever your security practices are and put them as building blocks into the platform team does not need to become security experts themselves, right? It's another thing that they haven't got to try to remember. It can be contributed into the platform and then consumed by the platform consumers. So through this producer-consumer approach, what you end up with is multiple people contributing into the platform, and the platform starts to mature, right? So it's maturing because it's got capabilities like security, and it gets to growing capabilities like databases. And this growth and this maturity of your internal platform is not coming at the expense of the platform team, their sort of sanity and mental health. And it's not coming at the cost of having to grow the platform team. It's literally just passing some of the effort of building the platform out within your organization to your own subject matter experts. Now, at this point, you might be looking at me a little skeptically and thinking that doesn't sound likely. So let me tell you about a case study that we recently published on our website that describes exactly how NatWest Bank have done this. So NatWest Bank, for context, is a top 5 UK bank, more than 60,000 employees and over 19 million customers, and they're growing as well. They have been on their platform journey for quite a while. And one of their goals has been precisely this, right? They want to be able to distribute cognitive load so that they don't have to scale out their platform team to be hundreds of people. We recently published a case study that described how they've done this, but their key capability that they wanted was this producer-consumer. I think they describe it as platform democratization, but this was the key thing they were looking for building out their internal platform. And they were able to do this and involve multiple teams across the bank who all contributed into their internal platform. So they used our software that Ivan mentioned earlier, Cratix, but our abstraction is what we call a promise, and that we're able to basically wrap things up as promises, provide them into the platform for multiple teams. So they've had database, they've had storage, they've had networking, they've had multiple teams contributing. And that's allowed the platform team to offer lots of capabilities without having to, like I say, have hundreds of people. And in addition, they've had some other kind of great results. So they've been able to reduce time to provision development environments. They've been able to get a better developer experience because things are available on demand. So you can read that case study at your leisure. Which, moving on, leads me to the next part about how to get started with this multiplayer approach. If you're thinking, oh, I wish I was NatWest Bank and I wish I could do that, how to do it. So platform engineering, as I mentioned, is still a practice that is, it's not actually new, but it's certainly evolving in terms of its principles and how we think about it. One thing that a lot of us agree on in this space, Simon might contradict me in a bit, but some of us agree on, is that platform engineering is a socio-technical practice. It's not just the tools and technology, it's also the people. So when I think about how teams work together, I tend to go back to Team Topologies, because the other thing they talk about is interaction modes, and they talk about 3. They talk about collaboration, X as a service, and facilitating. So how does this work in practice? Well, collaboration is the starting interaction mode, and this is where you're trying to discover the needs of your users. So in this kind of problem space that we're in, we want to understand what should the building blocks of the platform be, what do our consumers need, and therefore what components do we need to put into the platform. And the best way to understand that is just go and ask people. So in Team Topologies, they mark this collaboration mode with this little diamond pattern that you can see. But basically, platform teams should go and talk to their application teams, is all this actually means. Go and ask them, what do they need? What services do you need? What tools do you need? How do you need them? Take that information back and then offer those things, or work out how to offer them into the platform. It might also be a good starting point to build empathy with the application teams, because they themselves might be providers into the platform. Some of your stream-aligned teams, your app teams, might have things that they want to contribute to the platform. So building empathy early with those teams, talking to them, understanding what they do, is a great way to understand if they should also contribute to the platform. And this collaboration mode is where we start with all different teams, right? Building empathy, having conversations, like getting to know people. I mean, sometimes that's awkward, but it's a key thing to start off with, is collaboration. And through that collaboration, platform teams, specialist teams, maybe some of the app teams start providing these building blocks. They start building up this platform, which starts to look like a marketplace, right? It's a set of services available for the platform consumers to then access and consume. But what you want to drive towards is this interaction mode, which is these two little semicircles, which is X as a service, right? Team Topologies makes strong recommendation that you don't want high-touch collaboration, which is intensive and there's lots of conversations. You don't want that forever. What you want is your platform to be frictionless. It should feel a bit like a cloud provider or a SaaS product that's internal. It should offer the services, self-service, on demand when people need them. And you want to get to that X as a service mode so that people can, self-serve the things that they need. So the last part, the technical requirements. Okay, so how exactly do you go about creating this provider-consumer model? How do you end up with this kind of marketplace, this platform marketplace, especially if you're in a organization that has, legacy tech, brownfield? I feel like, does anyone start with just greenfield? Not many. So the classic answer that consultants say, it depends. It depends which technologies you're currently running. It depends what you want to achieve. There are lots of technology choices out there. There are lots of vendors that will sell you stuff. I'm one of them, so I should know. But where you decide what to build, what to buy, will entirely be context specific, right? It will depend on what you've got in your org already, what your skill set is, and what you want to do. One pattern that we've observed a lot in the industry recently is the rise of portals, developer portals. So you see things like Backstage from Spotify. Folks heard of that? A few things, okay. Or Port or Cortex. There's lots of developer portals available. Portals are great, right? A portal gives you a great way for your users to be able to discover what your platform has. It's a sort of a nice window into the platform. But I heard a really good quote the other day that said, if you start your internal developer platform journey by starting with the portal, it's a bit like building your house and starting with the front door and not the foundations. So it's nice to be able to have this pane of glass that shows all the things available, but you have to have the things available, right? And you have to have the services that actually work underneath it. So when it comes to choosing the foundations of your platform, again, there's lots of tech available. It's going to really depend on whereabouts you are, as I mentioned. But I want to give you just a few questions to consider. When you're thinking about this provider-consumer model, how long does it take for a provider, whatever it is, whatever tool, technology, service, etc., how long does it take for a provider to add a new offering into the platform? So if you're familiar with Backstage, how long does it take to offer a new kind of Backstage tile? How long does that actually take to make a thing available? Once it is available, how long does it take for one of the consumers of the platform to get a thing? Right? If it's Postgres or anything available as a service, how long does it then take to get one? Is it actually self-serve? Or is it click on a thing, but then it actually just raises a ticket and then it actually does a whole bunch of other stuff and it actually takes ages, right? How long does it take to actually get one of the thing? And the other thing for platform teams specifically to think about, when you've got a bunch of these things running, how hard is it to keep them running? How hard is it to patch, update, maintain? What's the day two experience like for the platform team or for the platform providers, right? If there's things that are running in the platform, how hard is it to keep them running and keep them up to date? And the last question, have a look at Gratix. Maybe time to have a look or not, up to you. So that takes me to the end. I've covered quite a lot, but just a quick recap. Platform engineering, its main goal is to reduce the cognitive load for developers. Your internal platform should be a force multiplier. It should not be a bottleneck. It should not be a gatekeeper. It should enable teams to be able to go faster. But it doesn't have to be single player mode. The platform itself should not be the work of one poor overloaded team that can't keep up to date, because that's where bottlenecks happen. It should be possible to allow multiple people to contribute so that you haven't got to keep hiring more and more platform teams and platform engineers. And then the last thing to consider, it's not just about the tools and technology, it's also the people. So you have to try to make sure that if you're switching to this type of interaction mode, bringing people along with you, right? People should understand how they can contribute to the platform and how they can consume from the platform. Quick shout out for SlideChef for my fabulous Minecraft themed slides. Also thank you to my 2 children who taught me how to play Minecraft, even though I'm really bad at it. If you're interested in learning a bit more, this is my lovely AI generated image of me in a Minecraft theme. My head looks very odd, but this is me and my dog, Minecraft style. You can find me on LinkedIn, not Twitter these days, or X. LinkedIn, Blue Sky or email are the best bets, or you can scan this code and find out more about Syntasso and what we do. And don't think there's time for questions, but I will be around so you can ask me later. Thanks very much.
Welcome.